Hello, Janeites, and welcome to Austen Chat, a podcast brought to you by the Jane Austen Society of North America. I'm Brecken Wood from the Georgia region of JASNA. After hosting 35 episodes, I'm taking the summer off, but the podcast isn't. We have several special episodes and guest hosts lined up to keep the Austen conversation flowing, and I'll be back in the fall. In this episode, JASNA's Vice President for Regions and newsletter editor Susan Wampler chats with Clueless writer and director Amy Heckerling about the making of the totally classic modern-day adaptation of Emma. The conversation was recorded last year during JASNA's members-only Clueless watch party held in honor of the film's 30th anniversary. Amy Heckerling is an acclaimed writer, director, and producer whose work spans film, television, and theater. In addition to writing and directing Clueless, she also wrote and directed Look Who's Talking, Look Who's Talking 2, Loser, I Could Never Be Your Woman, and Vamps. Her directing credits include Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Johnny Dangerously, and National Lampoon's European Vacation, and she produced A Night at the Roxbury. Amy's television work has included executive producing, writing, and directing episodes for the series Clueless and Fast Times, and directing episodes of The Office, Gossip Girl, The Carrie Diaries, Red Oaks, Weird City, and Royalties. Amy also wrote the script for Clueless the Musical, which opened at London's Trafalgar Theatre in the West End in March 2025. I hope you love this episode.
Can we go back to the very beginning of when you first came up with the idea for Clueless? I know it evolved through, went through a few studios, started out as a television series idea, correct? You just kind of talk about that evolution to Paramount when you finally got it to lift off.
It was a long and bumpy road because I had been working on other things and I had a successful movie, but that didn't seem to get me the projects and the establishment that I wanted. I was still in the sort of girl ghetto. And I thought, well, what would I like to do? What would make me happy? Forget this movie industry. And I just thought of characters I really loved, which were always very optimistic people, because I don't understand how people could go around being optimistic. And two movies that, one movie and one book. Gentlemen Prefer Blondes with Laura Lee. She was just so sure that all men were in love with her. And Ed Wood, he was writing really horrible movies and directing them, and he was just enjoying himself and feeling so artistically fulfilled and happy. And I thought, imagine somebody who just can't burst their bubble. They just see what's wonderful and fun, and they're enjoying what they're doing, and they're sure that they're right. And when they look in the mirror, they think they look great. And, what kind of person would that be? And so I wrote a pilot for 20th Century Fox with this teenage girl, and they passed on it. And then I got a new agent because I thought, why is everything going wrong? And I got this agent, Ken Stovitz at CAA, who is amazing. And he said, let me see everything you've been working on and, things I've been writing. And he read the pilot and he said, this is a movie. This isn't the TV show. And I was like, yeah, I'd love that. So I started to think, okay, what are the bones of an entire script with a beginning, middle, and end with this kind of character? Where have I seen that where it worked? And then I remembered reading Emma in college. So I reread that and I was like, boy, this Jane Austen is pretty timeless. And everything in it, the book I was using is all underlines, because it's like, this could be here. This is like when they do this. This is how she would say that. And it was like she had laid it all out. And it was like, this blessing from the past. And so my agent said, let's go back to Fox because they own the material that you wrote before. So maybe they'd be interested because they already, have a foothold. And so I wound up writing a script for Fox. And I had a wonderful executive who was a big fan of Jane Austen. Her name is Elizabeth Gabler. And we just had a great time working on, the script. And when I handed it in with, I also made a videotape of Alicia Silverstone from the Crying Aerosmith video. And I said, I love this girl, and here's the script. And they said no. And the feeling was, at that time, a number of comedies came out with young people and implying they were stupid, and that was the joke. There was a movie called Airheads, and there was a movie called Politically Correct University, PCU, and I thought they were funny. It was like Steve Buscemi and Adam Sandler and David Spade, and they were funny movies, but they didn't perform the way the studios wanted them to. So they said, no more stupid young people. And that was like, once the studio says that and the agents all hear it and the producers hear it, it's like, okay, nobody's interested in stupid young people. And so to have a script with young people called Clueless, it's like kind of like an automatic, you don't even have to read it, just. So everybody in town passed, town being LA. Ken Stovitz, my agent, just would not give up. He said, this is too good. They don't get it. They're so stupid, blah, blah. And where are we going to go? And just so angry and determined. And he just kept plugging away and plugging away. And finally it got to Scott Rudin, the producer who did every Oscar movie. So, and he liked it. And once he liked it, the studios started bidding against each other to have it. So that's how strong their opinions are.
Can you tell us a little bit about the casting process? You knew you had Alicia Silverstone in mind, and you've launched. Some of the films that you've done, like Sean Penn, kind of really ignited his career when you did Fast Times, and all of the Clueless actors have gone on to a lot of success. Paul Rudd, that was one of his first films. Just talk about that process and who was hardest to cast, which role. And I know you had to fight for Alicia Silverstone, I believe, a little bit.
It's weird because casting with really young people it's like a river. Every time you stick your foot in it, it's different. And the young people that were around then were wonderful. So I was lucky. And I knew I wanted Alicia. And when I met her, I just loved her. She was just so endearing and so youthful and innocent and just guileless. It was just like she could say these lines that coming out of anybody else, you would think, oh, she's so conceited. But with her, it's just like childish and innocent. And then, I wanted to find the perfect guy that we would all love for her. And there was a pilot that didn't go, something like Red Oaks or something. And the young guy in it was Paul Rudd. So that was all I saw of him. But then he came in and he read, and I loved him. But we still were very early in the casting, so they wanted me to see all these other people. And I ran into him in a coffee place, and he had cut his hair really short. And I was like, what did you do? I want you, I want you in this movie. I wanted you to be scruffy and college guy. And he goes, I didn't hear from anyone. I was like, he immediately went to, they don't like me. It was like, he gave us no time at all. We have to cast. But in any case, that all worked out great. And then for Dion, I wanted somebody very regal, somebody that would seem like she was a queen. And so you wouldn't expect this kind of behavior from somebody very young. And it wouldn't be that she's stuck up. It's just she's royalty. And Stacey Dash had that quality. There's just something very knowing and, powerful about her. And Brecken, that was hard because it was he was very close friends with Seth Green, and the two of them was so adorable. And it was but there was just something so scruffy and lovable about Brecken. You see him, and there's a vulnerability and a coolness. So you just, feel like he's the perfect person for Brittany. And Brittany, she just came in and blew us away. She was just like a puppy, You just want to take care of her. And she seems so like open to the world, but clueless about what it is. And you'd see why somebody would want to like adopt her and take care of her. So that worked out great. And, they were all, I could go on and on about every person.
It's a terrific cast. I mean, it really is. Can you talk a little bit about the writing process? There's so many things in Emma that we see that you really brought to this and modernized this. How did you decide on making Josh an ex-stepbrother versus, a neighbor or something else? And then also Christian. We talk about those kind of choices.
Well, I tried to take what is the essence of that person in the story? And one of the big, tropes of like romantic comedies is you find out that the person that's been under your nose the whole time is the one you really love. Of course, there's a lot of doing things to prove that, but the fact that you don't count them as a possible love interest because they're there all the time. And you've seen that in a lot of romantic movies. And that was sort of in Jane Austen's, it's like her sister and his brother were married. He was like family to her. They're not blood relatives, but they could fight with each other because it's like he sees her doing something stupid and wrong and he could get mad at her. Now, people behaved in a certain way in that level of society. They didn't go yelling at each other, but they can because they're that close. And so I wanted that quality of somebody that you can fight with like they're your family, but they really aren't. And the fact that, in Emma, his name is Knightley. And so he's a knight. He's like a warrior who goes out and fights for you. And Joshua, in all the books about names, is, for the Battle of Jericho, he's a warrior. So they're both people that will go out and fight for you. Let's see, Christian and Frank Churchill. It's like she decides, and she's got way too much of imagination. She makes up whole scenarios in her head of what she thinks is happening, which is wrong. But she thinks, maybe I want one boyfriend, what is that all about? I mean, everybody's falling in love and they seem to be really, she likes to make it happen. But what does that feel like for her? And so she decides to let herself feel something. Now, that means she's got to pick out the perfect person, which has nothing to do with interactions between two humans. It has to do with her making lists and figuring it out and finding the person that on paper is right. So in Emma, she realizes, oh, here would be a good guy for me. I'm never going to get married. I have to take care of my father, but I could see being involved with somebody he's handsome, he's smart, he makes good jokes, we laugh a lot. On paper, he's perfect. But it's not emotional, it's not real. And she doesn't even know that he's unavailable because she's imagined what he is more than learned. And so Cher hasn't thought about, is he even interested in girls? Of course he must be, and especially me. He must be interested in me. She makes up things in her head without seeing what the world really is. And so she doesn't know he's unavailable. It just never would occur to her. And so how are the different ways to make somebody unavailable that you didn't know they were unavailable? In those days, if you want to get the inheritance from a person that's going to die soon, but they don't like who you like, maybe you should put that off for a while, but let her know you really love her. So it's a secret engagement. And other people are going, what's going on with him? And they could see that there's relationship stuff, but they're not really together, but she's mad at him in a way that you wouldn't be to somebody, so other people might figure it out. And certainly other people could figure out that Christian is gay, but because she's Cher or Emma, she doesn't figure it out.
And how about Mr. Woodhouse versus Nell Horowitz? Kind of like mirror images in a way.
Yeah, she feels like she's in charge of things, and she is in charge in a way. And to take care of somebody, that's a big responsibility for a young girl. And that makes her feel powerful. Because if she says, the doctor said you could eat this, but not that, and the doctor is sending over a guy to give you this shot, and, and I made your appointment, and you're going to see your parents. And for a 15-year-old who's been doing that for a while, that's pretty, impressive and powerful. And Emma is like, he can't go here because he'll be too cold. But if they've made arrangements for him to have a fire going that he could sit by, he can go out to that place and socialize. And here are the friends that can come by. And he likes to see his doctor, who he could complain to all the time, but he's friends. But, so Emma is a caregiver, which makes her feel like she's in charge of people, as is Cher.
Absolutely. You also talk about the lexicon you created for this. You went to, I think you observed, or you sat in on some classes at Beverly Hills High School to observe, and you were, it just has such a unique lexicon and vernacular for these kids. And it's just, you still hear all these phrases today. I mean, they really took hold. Can you just talk about the process of creating their language and world?
Well, like any, way of speaking, it usually comes out of a disenfranchised group. I mean, there's prison slang, there's Cockney slang, there's gay slang, there's, whatever groups decide they need their own language so that other people, we're not talking for them, we're talking amongst ourselves, and we don't want them to know what's going on with us. And young people, of course. So, I mean, I was in Beverly Hills High School. It's not that like all the vocabulary came from there, but just from, and also you're working with actors, and young people come in all the time and they're reading for you. And one guy came in, and this was after in California and other places in America, there had been a lot of shootings where post workers had gone a little crazy and shot people. And so he comes in, this actor, and he said, could I say postal? It's like, because like for people that are like angry. And I went, that's great. Could I have that? Yeah. And it was circulating around his group of friends, but he just told it to me. And just one day we were shooting on, this was later a TV thing. And Stacey Dash says to me, can I call him my boo? Because that's what somebody said to me. And one day Donald Faison said, I heard this kid saying he's keeping it real. I go, yeah, I don't want to do that. So if you're around young people, they're going to tell you stuff. And now everything is texting. So, when people say IRL, TMI or whatever, you go Google, what is that? And then then you're doing it, and there's always been words that you like or words that you don't like. And I loved having Christian be somebody into old movies from like the 30s and have that like, Dashiell Hammett kind of like slang, James Cagney movies, the slang of the 30s and 40s. And then Cab Calloway published the Jive Talk Dictionary. I don't know what year that was, probably the 30s probably. But there's been like 1 million dictionaries of slang. And now it's all online. And of course, you could even talk to people and learn stuff if you want to do that. But it's out there, and it's fun because if you say something is great, the way you say that says how old you are, how much money you have, where you live.
Another thing that was really distinctive, I mean, you also have so many literary references in this film, Shakespeare, Dickens, everybody gets name dropped. It's really amazing. It's a very smart film, very funny. Every little detail is so perfect, I think. And I remember seeing Bill Pope, I think, talking about he's looking for photo, like, I want it to be happy. Is that correct? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, Okay, Bill Pope is a genius, and a lot of DPs are, but like then there's also a lot that just will go with like the latest thing. Like for a while, everybody was using long lenses, which makes, the background all blurry, and you just pick out the one thing that you're focused on. But it's a very claustrophobic field because you're squished in everything. And, then it's on the Levi's commercial and everybody likes it. So everybody's doing that. And then it makes it look like you're not in any particular place. You're you. And there's a smushy out of focus world around you. And if you're stoned and you think you're the center of the world, that might be a good look. But it ain't a good look for everything, but it becomes a style. Then there was shaky cam, which was like, I think it started with, The Office and all of that stuff with like, we're pretending it's a documentary. Now, if you're shooting a documentary, you get a cameraman who can hold the camera stick. But everybody was shaking the cameras around to show that it was real. And it's not on a tripod or a dolly. It's in somebody's hands. So I hated that. That makes you physically sick. Then the other thing I really hate, I hate so much, is smoke. After Cabaret, which was beautiful, which was a smoky cafe in Berlin in the 30s. And Bob Fosse and Jeffrey Unsworth, the cameraman, made a beautiful looking film. But everybody thought, oh, smoke. So they just put smoke all over the place, and it's still happening more and more and more. And I can hardly watch a lot of things because I feel like I can't breathe, So I wanted something that was like a world that's happier than just DPs following the herd. And Bill Pope is a brilliant person because he goes for what works for the film, not for what everybody else is doing. And he does it, so that it's just beautiful. And so I felt like I could talk to him and tell him what my problems were because they're deep. I grew up in the Bronx. There's windows along one side of the building, so light only comes from one place. And my father, we didn't have a lot of money. Anytime I put a light on, he'd say, we don't have, stock in Con Edison. Like, I don't want to pay a big bill for lighting, so shut the lights off till there's practically no light at all. And then you could put a light on, but not all the lights, just where you are, and shut it off right away. Now, I'm for being environmental and not wasting energy, but I was just really bummed. So when I explained that to Bill Pope, and you could show a beautiful Vermeer with light coming in from one window, and certainly nobody put on electric lights. But if that was how all the lighting was, I would be really bummed. So we both brought in tons of photos, and he printed out a lot of stuff from different movies. And I'd say, this makes me feel like this. That makes me feel like this. And he says, but doesn't this make you feel like that? And it's like, well, yeah, as long as it's bright enough, And, a lot of DPs, when they hear bright, they think, oh, you want to do it like television. Television is bright, and that sucks. And I don't want it to be flat and like television. I want it to be attractive. I want it to be someplace you might laugh at a joke and you might like to live there. So we worked it all out. And even though I'd say to him, ugh, I hate being in the sun, which of course I do. But he would yank me over to some backlit leaves on a tree and say, come on, isn't that beautiful? I go, you're right. And it's like, okay. So as long as like we have that as the background, and it's not like everybody in this harsh sun, but it's like pretty and sparkly and not garishly colored, but has a beautiful palette. So that was a fun way to work. And so satisfying to see something look finally like I wanted a film to look like.
And that leads to the costuming. Mona May's designs are very colorful and everybody had a very distinctive look, I think.
It was not the first thing I did with Mona. And it's like, I don't know, I used to play with cutout dolls when I was little. And we'd have the little paper dresses. And it was like having another friend that you could do that with, you know? And we'd have like the cut up pieces of outfits, like this with that and that with this. And there'd be a whole board of like, you know, what they would wear when and what the other people were wearing and all of that. And I wanted this palette going through the film so that it was fall and there was like the, you know, the leaves and the like autumn colors. And there was a consistency. I mean, I couldn't control it completely because you can't tell an extra not to wear something. I mean, you can, but you can't dress every single one of them. And as soon as you turn their back, they're putting on the brightest color there is so that their parents could see them in the movie. But we worked on that. And then Christmas time at the Val party, that's could be a little more garish and like, you know, green and red and bright, you know, Christmas lights. And then when it's spring and Christian arrives and it's a new beginning, it's a new birth, and it's like pastels and Easter eggs. So those colors go throughout. And, you know, we wanted to make the people look good in their outfits, but also like Elisa was so fun to dress because she's the fashion victim. So she's somebody that thinks that she has these ideas of like, you know, she's in a combat outfit, but it's like over the knee leggings that are camouflage, or, you know, she's a sailor one day and she's like somebody that's like a little psychotic about what she is and what she could dress like. And Stacy, of course, is elegant. She always looks like she could be giving orders to all the knights, you know. And Alicia, her father, is a litigator, and that's the most important, wonderful job a person can have. So she's wearing a three-piece suit, and you know, so we had a lot of fun with all of that stuff, and it was just a blast to work on. And she could go on for hours and hours about how she found the yellow suit as opposed to a different colored suit, as opposed to, you know, I mean, but it's all true. You know, there would be days where we'd say, that looks good. Okay, she'll wear that. And then she'll come to me the next day and she'll go, I couldn't sleep. It's like not good enough. You know, and you go, I mean, you know, I'd do that over like, that line's not working. I get her.
You were all perfectionists, all professionals. It shows. And about the music, the soundtrack is like real, you know, went platinum. I mean, it was like a huge deal. And it's just like, anytime I hear any of those songs, I think about Clueless. How did you put that together? I mean, was it a process? Were you involved in making those choices? Obviously, as director, you oversaw everything, but.
Well, I mean, that's, you know, another thing that defines who the people are. Let's see. Well, the Radiohead song was, you know, I mean, it's smart college stuff and it's depressing and I'm a creep, you know, and, you know, smart and self-loathing. So she comes in and it's like, this is a downer. What's with college kids and crybaby music? And he's like, you know, this is a really great, cool song. He didn't say that, but that's how I feel. But so you could see that they're in different places. And Kids in America was a song that I had liked since Fast Times because I wanted the Go-Go's to start off Fast Times. And they said, you can't have them. You know, you have to use all these songs by the producer who has all these groups. And I don't like that song. And I didn't like the ones that they were offering me. And so I thought I'd go to this record store because I'm a million years old. And they had this group, you know, Kim Wilde. And you know, it was like underground artists, people that you didn't know. And I heard this song, Kids in America, and I brought it in. And they said, I like this song in this album. And they were like, no, you can't use that. And I went, okay, I'll use it somewhere else. I'll wait a number of years and then I'll use it. So we did that. We got the Muffs, who were adorable, and they did a good version of it. But that said what I wanted to say. Here we are, we're happy, and this is great. It's an insane point of view, but yeah.
What has surprised you most about the longevity of Clueless? I mean, it really, just continues to grow in popularity.
I don't get it. I mean, I'm amazed and I'm grateful. I don't know how to process it.
We talked at the very beginning of this chat about the musical, and when in London, I saw it in March, and we were in line, and there were a ton of tweens in plaid outfits, and they were so excited. And obviously, they were not alive in 1995, but they could not be more thrilled to be there. I mean, so it definitely keeps drawing in new generations. I mean, I know you must be really proud of it, but is there anything any reason you feel that why this has caught hold?
I'm not the person to ask. I just work here.
Well, what did you enjoy most about making the film? Was there one thing that really stood out?
Well, that was the most fun I've ever had working on a film. Everybody was like so into it. And everybody was like, they were like at their peak of, doing their art. They were just, and they just brought it, the actors were all wonderful. And the crew was like really gung-ho, and everybody was like sort of got the idea and what we were all like going towards the same thing. So that was, and then like sometimes I'd be like walking around and I'd see where our set was, and I'd see just my colors and my people, and I go, oh, I want to be there.
Amy, someone has asked, would you ever consider updating another Jane Austen novel?
Well, I mean, I think that Sense and Sensibility was done so brilliantly by Emma Thomas. So I don't know if anything needs to be messed with from that. And then Bridget Jones was Pride and Prejudice. So I don't know. I mean, it's been done. Sense and Sensibility was period piece, but I mean, as much as I love reading her, I don't know what else I would do.
Do you have another favorite Austen besides Emma? Is there anything? If none of these other films that existed, like Bridget Jones, do you have a dream project if you could go back in time?
If I could go back in time? I don't know. I mean, that one just hit me. But I think on the whole, my tastes are like quirkier and darker.
One of the questions is, was it challenging in the 1990s to have Christian be gay? Was that a problem, and how was that received?
Maybe people had issues with it, but in my brain, it didn't make any sense to me for it to be an issue.
I mean, it's a perfect reason for him to, he stands out from the other, the way he dresses, he's very different. It's just a great way of making Frank Churchill modern. It seemed to work perfectly.
There was a sort of resurgence of like swing dancing, and, that people were kind of into that era. And I would see young guys dressed in like, not zoot suits, but in like period, 30s, 40s suits. And you think like, oh, they look good, And I mean, it was just like a little blip on the radar, but but it happened. And so you could see that somebody that would like not be so comfortable in his time would see something that looks interesting and get into it.
Absolutely. Someone else is asking why the film wasn't really advertised as being, an update of Emma. Do you recall those decisions?
There was not a lot of, we must go see the new Jane Austen movie feeling. I mean, they were like, series of Pride and Prejudice and all of that, and things on PBS. But I think those all came later.
Someone else wants to know about, such a Betty, the Betty, Barney, the phrases. That's a reference to the Flintstones, correct?
Yeah, there was also UCLA used to publish a slang report, the linguistics class, and I think that was in there. But the idea that like Betty was very pretty and a Barney, nobody could figure out how he got her.
We talked earlier about the casting, and I remember hearing Paul Rudd talking about coming in and auditioning for pretty much every role, including Murray. Can you talk about that? Because he had a different idea of what that character was.
I don't remember him reading for Murray, but I knew that when he came in that he was great, and so you don't know if you're going to find another person that would be good for Josh, that like you wouldn't want to waste all this talent. Like maybe he'd want to be Elton or somebody, I mean, I felt like, he's the kind of actor that can do a lot of things. So I just wanted to see what else to have in the bag to pull out when we like shuffled them all around.
And I also I know you had Alicia Silverstone in mind early on, but that Reese Witherspoon was looked at, and even and Sarah Michelle Gellar for Amber. Is that true?
No, I did not know.
But I think I saw that they were considered, like, there were just a long list of names. This is like any casting. It's like, you get people pushed your way, whether you have different ideas, but no.
I remember I met Reese Witherspoon, but she wasn't like coming in and reading or any of that. It was like, the agents get a lot of young people and they like have them go out and meet everybody that's doing anything. But it's not like the casting person said, here's Reese and now she's going to read this. I mean, Sarah Michelle Gellar, yes, she did read for Lisa. And I thought she was great, but then she was working on something else and the schedules wouldn't work together.
How young were you when you decided you wanted to be a director? I know you went to NYU Film School and then you went to American Film Institute. So you knew pretty early on that you wanted to be a director and a writer. What was the first spark for you?
Well, I was always drawing and I was always watching movies. And I went to art and design high school. So I couldn't stand my neighborhood and the people there and bullies and all of that. And I said, I got to get out of here. And so I applied and I made it. And I was very happy to be in an art school instead of a normal high school. And there was a boy that sat next to me. And we were reading Great Expectations. And no matter what we were reading in the class, he was like, that's not how it was in the movie. And he would act out the whole movie on me. And the teacher was like, not now, not now. And then at the end, sometimes she said, okay, how'd they do it in the movie? And we had to write down what we wanted to do when we grew up as a composition. And I wanted to be a writer artist for Mad Magazine because I thought it was funny and I liked it. And then he said he was going to go to Hollywood and be a movie director. And I was like, wait a minute. Movies are like this special, amazing thing that only like rich people and smart people that live in the Hollywood place get to do. And here he is, the guy that copies from me on every test. He had the nerve to say he wanted to do it. I mean, I didn't think you could say you wanted to do it. It was too amazingly wonderful for a regular person. And then I said, screw it. I want to do it. I know I've always wanted to do it. I didn't think it was a real thing that people were allowed to do. So then I was like looking into film schools and, had 3 jobs to earn enough money to go to NYU Film School. And
we have a few more questions in the chat. The reaction shots in the movie are very effective. Did you have a special approach to that?
It was, I wanted it to be scary and yet silly because, I mean, you could die on the freeway if you don't know what you're doing. And I was, when I first learned to drive, I was hit by a drunk driver. So I don't take that stuff lightly. But also the fact that I don't drive on freeways because I'm afraid of getting hit by a fast car because of that incident. And the idea that like sometimes you're on a road and, it doesn't say, but you're on the road that's only going to land on the freeway. And whenever that would happen to me, I would get on the freeway and just scream until the exit. And and then I would just be so grateful that I was still alive. And so I thought, that makes sense for them.
Yeah, I've driven on the freeway by accident in LA. I moved there in 1994. I can't watch that scene without just reliving that moment. So, yeah. A few more questions. One is about the Emma and Miss Bates relationship and how in the film it's really Cher being insensitive to Lucy about her being from El Salvador, but that's a pretty small part of the film. And the question is about making that choice. Is it because that you didn't think Cher should be so heartless as the way that Cher treats Miss Bates in the Box Hill scene? Or what? Tell us a little bit more about that choice.
That's funny because in the show that's on the West End, I got so much pressure to make that a bigger moment and make her be more horrible and make Josh see her being horrible and have her feeling really bad. And I didn't want her to be that horrible. I just wanted her to be like she doesn't get it. Like, I don't speak Mexican. She doesn't even realize that that's not a language. So it's silly of her to, and for realizing that she hurt somebody, but she didn't know any better. She didn't mean to. I mean, I didn't want her to be a rotten person, but they all were very insistent. So I have her being madder at the housekeeper in the show. And it still grates on me because I feel like, but they said, you can't say, oh, she's not a Mexican is like, now it's like politically incorrect for her to be mad that someone thought she was Mexican. So I go, okay, I want to be sensitive to that. But how do I do that and show that she didn't mean any harm, but like she doesn't want to like get distracted right before the driving test. And so I kind of lost that battle because everybody agreed that like, no, she's got to be really bad. And I still am not sure about that. But yeah, she did do something that could be thought of as thoughtless and, why didn't you do this when I told you to do, So she is kind of being like heartless for a moment, but, the relationship they have is like they'll be best pals in 2 minutes. Like she knows that Cher doesn't mean any harm. She knows she's just like a little kid who does things that meaningless and doesn't mean to be mean. So that was that. I tried to make it so that it would work. In Emma, of course, she's going along with Frank Churchill and his behavior of like, it's cool to be insulting. I mean, that's certainly still a thing. The people that think of the nasty comments that are so bitchy and that she think, oh, is that the way to show that you're clever? I'll go along with it. Because, when you meet a guy and you're trying to impress him and you're seeing what his gang does, you think that's the way to behave. She knows in her heart it's not right, and she'll stop that stuff soon. But for that moment, she tried it on, and Knightley saw it and reminded her that he thinks that she's better than that, and cut that out. And she knows he's right.
We also have a question about the budget for the movie. It was what, 12 or 13 million, is that right?
Yeah, what was it? It was less than 15, but there was like low middle.
It's a very tight budget for the costumes and for how just how beautiful it all looks.
I mean, there
It
were
grows-
big action scenes. The big action is being on the freeway. um,
Yeah.
So that's, in that respect, it's in her house, it's in school, it's in a mall.
Another question is, was Dion's character based on anybody in the book?
No, that one, just like she needed a friend.
And how did your feminism play into the film at all? And I remember hearing you talk earlier, I think, about that there was some pressure to not have it be all, with 3 female leads, to have a more male-centric story.
That's been the story of my life. It was like at Fox, it was like, here are the notes, why are we like just only with this girl? The guys should be bigger characters, and maybe Josh lives next door so that they could always be around. And then she realizes she loves him, and then how is she going to get him? And he's right next door, and maybe his mother likes her father, and maybe she can matchmake them. And I was like, oh, give me a break. I just don't want to do that. And also, the story is from her point of view, and we're in her head. And then what? We're going to see scenes with the boy next door. How'd he get in her head? I mean, that tears it apart.
Another question is it any easier being a female director 30 years later?
Well, I've been doing this theater stuff for a long time. And then there was like, people will say, oh, everything is woke now. But it's like, it's not really, but also it has to have the appearance of. So if there's a great guy that is brilliantly talented that you want to be doing something, it's like, no, because he's not female or this or that or the other, so we can't use him. And you're going, but why can't we just use everybody that's good and use women that are good, use different ethnicities that are good, certain sexual proclivities that are good? Yeah, I'm just like, there's good all over the place. Then let's give everybody a chance. Anyway, what do I know? All I know is like for a million years, it was like you can't have a movie where the main character is like a female. It's like they could be part of a rom-com. But I've also been in pitch things where it's like, the main character can't be Black. He could be the best friend. So I've been hearing a lot of dumb shit my whole life.
Well, that feels like a perfect place to thank you for being so generous with your time today. And it was just absolutely terrific. It's just been a joy. So thank you so much. I'm so grateful for your time, Amy.
Well, I appreciate you guys. It was very nice of you to have me. And I appreciate Jane Austen. So props to her.
Dearest listeners, I am pleased to announce that Austen Chat now has over 200 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for your support. If you haven't yet given us a rating, please consider leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts so that more Janeites can find us and join our Austen-loving community. Again, thank you. I remain yours respectfully, Breckenwood.